You're listening to another ambitious Entrepreneur Network.com podcast, the voice for entrepreneurs and small business. Now, onto the show.
This is Women in Leadership Podcast, featuring success insights from women around the globe. Now, over to your host, Anne-Marie Cross.
And welcome to another episode of Women in Leadership Podcast, brought to you by the influencealliance.com, the business building community for coaches and consultants who want to build a profitable, scalable business while make a much bigger impact in the world with their message. And I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cross. Now, my guest today says awareness is your superpower, which I absolutely love and totally agree with. Joining me on today's show is Donalee Gastreich. Now, Donalee is the creator of her own life. She's the instigator behind knowing herself, growing herself, and living life empowered, a radiant light to illumine all shadows and pain and problems. And she's also the founder and CEO of Complete Solutions. Now, Donalee supports women in reaching their greatest potential. She assists her soul sisters in building their inner strength and relationship to source, allowing them to be bold, go for their dreams, and be seen. Now, on today's show, she's going to share why awareness is the number one skill that we all should master, bringing all of yourself to the present moment, why that's so important, as well as curiosity, the art of gentle, loving inquiry. Welcome to the show, Donalee.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome. And I love the quote, awareness is your superpower. I so agree with that. And I often talk about that. I mean, I started my career in the career coaching industry, and it was helping individuals become more self-aware of what motivated me. Why are some environments not suitable to me, yet I could still be doing the same role, but feel motivated in one area and fulfilled and not another. So awareness is massive. How are we going on that? Do you think people are starting to realize, becoming more familiar with who they are is so important, or we've got a little way to go? What are you finding?
I think we have a little ways to go. I do believe the last 2 years have aided us if we've been able to detach
Yes.
from the topic that's surrounding us and trying to consume us. Being an observer is part of where that awareness really expands out for us, when we can detach from the moment and notice our attachment to topics. And I know so many people have turned off the news because it was upsetting them. That's what awareness does. It lets you see where the angst is and how you can shift to feel better in your own life.
Beautiful. What was it that allowed you to see, or supported you in seeing how important that was? Was it a journey, or was it a number of events? Take us back to that moment or that time.
I think it was my own brokenness, my own pain, my own low self-esteem and low image of myself. And as I kind of followed the breadcrumbs back to where they took me in childhood, I realized that was a repeating pattern in my life.
Yes.
And that if I didn't learn to get a grip on it, when I finally got to the heart of what I needed, it was love. And I didn't get it the way I wanted it or needed it. And as an adult, as I was looking at this, I was like, okay, Donalee, so now what? You know what you want. Give it to yourself. Be that loving parent. The thing I learned about adulthood is we need to learn to parent ourselves through those wounds, through those discomforts, through the observations we're seeing, through our awarenesses, through our discomfort and our longings. And we get to parent ourselves and realize, what is it you really want? We have a personality and we have a soul. We're in a human form, but our truest nature is spirit. And we don't know how to connect the two.
Yeah.
I,
Let's dive in a little bit deeper around what you've just shared, because I think it's so important that we don't realize that things that have happened to us in the past, if we haven't healed from those, if we haven't addressed them, if you will,
yeah,
then that can often trigger us, as you say, in adulthood. And then when certain things happen around us, like the environment that we're in, the things that we listen to, the people that we tend to associate with, they can either enhance and empower us or disempower us and have us even because we can strengthen, can't we? Strengthen things positively, and we can even strengthen the negative things which cause us to go, into that spiral. Let's talk about, okay, what are some of the things that we can start to do around self-awareness? What were some of the things that you started to do? Because as you said, in one of the areas, why awareness is the number one skill that we should all master. What are some things that we can start doing to help us master that?
one is just paying attention to what we're paying attention to,
Mm.
noticing. And I tell clients, take a sheet of paper and draw 2 lines down it so that you have 3 columns, and label the columns positive, neutral, negative. And
Mhm.
as you're thinking during the day, just notice, I'm thinking about my mother and her illness. Am I worrying? Well, that's kind of negative. How could I change that? But until we start to notice where we're at,
Yeah.
we have no awareness. And
Yes.
we're just reacting to what life brings us. We're just
Mhm.
responding and reacting to every current moment. We're not being the co-creators of our own life. We're not
Mm.
making conscious decisions. We're actually living unconscious.
Yeah.
And then the result of that for me was I was a victim. I played a victim role. I was always hurt. I was always wounded. I was always left out, rejected. I mean, every situation was bringing me more of what I was feeling.
Mhm.
So we are magnetic in our energy, and whatever our predominant thinking
Yeah.
is what we give validation to in our reality. We find reasons to validate that so, whether
Yeah.
it's good, bad, or indifferent.
And whether we realize that we're doing that or not, that
Yeah.
would have been one of the biggest ahas and the greatest gifts I think that you could have ever given yourself, is to realize the things that I'm doing, that I'm saying, how I'm reacting is actually causing me to become even more of a victim. And we see that happen all the time, don't we? We see how, just in observing, if you will, going into that observer mode and how people are reacting and responding online. And once you know that, you are also better able to, what the word, cope or respond when people come to you with something that they're saying, and realize this has got nothing to do with me personally, but actually everything that shows what's going on in their life. And I'll give you an example, Donalee, and then I want to ask, what are some things that people can do to maybe see, what, I'm actually playing a bit of a victim here, but I want to become more of the victor and be able to support myself in responding better. Someone came out and attacked me, let's just say that, or had some negative things to say about an ad that I had on Facebook. Who do you think to call yourself the podcasting queen, and look at your background, you've got a door behind you, and that kind of thing. And rather than me responding negatively, I thought, that's interesting that she should come to me like that. And I just responded, well, it's not a name I gave myself. Other people called me that. And I'm actually in my office. This is not a backdrop. And I want to show people that you can share your message from wherever you are. It doesn't matter about location. All the best to you. Someone messaged me and says, I can't believe that this person did that. I know this person, and they have had a terrible upbringing as a child. And unfortunately, that's coming out. And this person was very much known as a bully. That's how it had manifested in herself. Now, I could have responded and say, how dare she talk to me like that? And all of that kind of thing. But I decided I'm not going to even address that in that way. I'm just going to turn it around and have a nice day. But that's the kind of thing that can often happen. We can get stuck in this cycle, can't we, of that's offending me and things like that, when we choose to take on that victim. what are some things that you've learned that perhaps you can share with us so that we can get out of that victim mode, but rather respond in an appropriate way?
Yeah, and it's really a calm, peaceful, and collective response, right? If you notice an energy in you that's firing up, like when you first read it, you
Yeah.
don't respond from that level,
No.
right? Because responding from that level is going to project exactly that into what you write, right? And
Yes.
then you'll be deleting what you typed out as you reread it, right?
Write it down on a piece of paper maybe, and then
Yeah.
put it away.
Yep. I think awareness in the beginning looks like a skill that we're practicing. But as we get more skillful at it and we spend more time in awareness and being present to this now moment, it's really a field, an energy field that we're in. And when I like to say, camp out there, when we hang out there more often, it not only shows us ourselves, but it shows us an awareness in others as well,
Mhm.
which you were modeling when you were confident in your own space,
Yeah.
able to share your motives, your intentions, your desires, right?
Mhm.
And and knowing that you're grounded and rooted in that. So awareness one aids you
Mhm.
in being your authentic self, standing in your power, not wobbling when others call you out or question you.
Mm.
But it also allows you to see in others projection as simply their pain,
Yeah.
their inner trauma, their inner point at that moment. You know, maybe they got up on the wrong side of the bed, had a few incidences that started their day off, and then they just jumped on this and saw this and just boop, out it
Yeah.
came. So I think as we grow in that field of awareness, it aids us not in one area of life, in all.
Oh, totally, totally. Something else that I want you to spend a little bit of time on too, because I think this is so important, and I love the way that you've kind of laid that out. And it's so true. Initially, I went, my goodness, but I had to take a deep breath. I actually prayed, and I just said, Lord, let me respond in a way that would
Mm.
honor you. Kind of no, that needs to be deleted.
Mm.
That's just so important. But one of the things that I see happening, and you mentioned this earlier about turning off TV, we have to understand what are some things that will trigger us. Because for me, I know that will trigger because I can see the lies and the propaganda. I can just see, and it turns me into someone who, I just cannot not hold myself back because innuendos, lies, that's why I started a podcast, to be the hope and inspiration amongst the doom and gloom of mainstream media. But we need to be mindful, do not continuously put yourself in situations where it's not the best for you. That's important, isn't it? Environment.
It really is. Environment's everything, and when we become more self-aware, we notice our inner energy and how it feels around certain groups, certain places, certain spaces. And we start to learn where we work best, where we interact best. Um, some of us even like to be at a table, at a certain table when we dine out,
Yeah.
right? And if there's none available, we may have a bad experience because we're in the wrong place.
Mm.
So honoring that for ourselves is really important because it not only affects our enjoyment of that moment, but the enjoyment of those we're with.
Mm.
What we don't understand in our human experience is we really do share energy.
Mhm.
We really do sense and feel one another in big, bold ways. And I believe the shift that's going on the planet right now is an up leveling, an
Mm.
evolution in our own abilities. The planet Earth is evolving and humanity's evolving. And I
Mhm.
believe the evolution taking place is actually bringing us into being multisensory beings.
Mm.
And this awareness couldn't be a bigger component
Mhm.
to tapping into and activating and bringing fully online new sensory perceptions. Our intuition, strengthening that inner voice within us, listening with clarity, stilling ourselves to notice what we feel. how
Mhm.
centered we feel, how grounded we feel, how confident. Being centered and grounded gives us the byproduct of confidence.
Yes. Yeah, there's a level of inner confidence that shines just that is just there, isn't it? And it doesn't matter what is happening around you, you're able to really move, if you will, make decisions, respond in a way that is not reactive, because often we'll say something and, once it's out there, it's hard to kind of capture that and say, I didn't mean that. Well, obviously, if you do say something, you'd want to apologize if that wasn't naturally what you would want them to say. You say that it's so important to be in the present moment, and I so agree, because if we're able to just pause for a moment, sometimes if we're not sure about what we're going to say, we don't have to respond. We don't have to contribute to that conversation. But I think being in the present moment, what that now enables us to do is stop reflecting in the past and stop projecting a future that may never happen. And I'll give you an example. So often, what I've done in the past is if I'm going to meet someone and that particular person is a little bit different, let's just say, than what I am and what have you, I'll have these conversations in my head, and he will say that or she will say that, and then I'll respond that way, and then this and this and the other, and then 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever's gone by, and I realize, do you realize how much time you have wasted in your own mind having a conversation that may never happen? Had I remained in the present, both of those situations
Yeah.
would not have impacted what was going on right then and there, because that moment has gone. Does that make sense? I'd love you to share. What are some
It
things that you
makes total sense. It makes total sense. And let me just say that no response is a response,
Yes.
right? So there's an ability to feel confident in knowing that you don't need to respond.
Mhm.
And there's a confidence in saying, I don't know. I don't have an opinion on that.
Mm.
If you don't have an opinion, why would someone want to keep talking about it? I mean, right now, we've got a lot of extremes going on in the world.
Mm.
And if you had an opinion on all of them, you'd get nothing done. You'd have
Oh,
no
that's
direction to your life.
You could be sharing those opinions and reading those opinions
Yeah.
24/7.
Yeah. And getting back to your question. So I fully believe that every single one of us has this power in us, but we've been so conditioned by our environment to have a response, to have an opinion, to know our thoughts on it, right? And we've been so programmed to be like the norm, right? Like we want to fit in, we want to look like others and not stand out too much. And that's really dimming our light.
Mm.
Where we're evolving is individuality. And it's really empowering ourselves into our full capacities
Mhm.
that real that really requires us to be so aware of where we're showing up as our not self, as
Mm.
that imposter syndrome or a conditioned version of who we really are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you said that, because, so often, I don't know, maybe I was just born different, but and I say this with utmost respect. I've always felt that, when there's communities of people, and this is for the people who've always been kind of on the outer, and we're quite happy with that. But it's important that even for those of you who feel that you do want to be part of that community, but you're thinking, or you're questioning what's going on here, that we can stand in our power and say, hang on a moment, no, this doesn't feel right. Intuitively, I know that, you know what I mean? So that we don't have to feel that you need to go a certain way because everyone else is doing that or not doing that. I think that's just saying we have that level of inner confidence, and and you've taken time to think and respond the best way is, yeah, just to be, as you say, that individuality, no, not be persuaded, because often we can do that too, can't we? There may, like in a work environment, you may be gifted in a certain way in leadership and be put forward, yet there's a group of people who you are hanging out with, and you think, well, if I do put myself forward for that role, will they think less of me? Will they think that I'm big noting myself? But you've got that
Mhm.
skill to be able to do that and lead, and rather than being held back from that community, by that community in your workplace.
I think the other thing that happens when we become so self-aware that we work on ourselves and that we become confident in ourselves, and we do speak up and we do not respond when we don't have anything to say. We're comfortable with the silence in the room and comfortable engaging in those courageous conversations that feel like an elephant's in the room, right?
Yeah.
But what happens when we do that is we give other people permission to do that.
Mhm.
And then we start to see others in a different way, more valuable. We
Mm.
respect them as they are different than us, right? We see their traits, their talents, their gifts as aspects we don't have, and we need them even more. So we want to embrace them and pull them into our circle and keep them close because they're great teammates, right?
Mm.
They have strengths and abilities that help polish us off and create a finished product that's just exceptional and extraordinary. And I feel like it's where we completely do away with diversity, equity, and inclusion training because it comes from within us as
Mm.
a natural byproduct of stepping into our own power, our own authenticity, loving ourselves, accepting ourselves, just integrating all those aspects into a whole and not being triggered and
Yeah. It's interesting you should say that because I remember just recently I was speaking to a number of women in senior roles within the tech space. And a number of them mentioned we were preparing for they're doing an online summit and we were preparing for their keynotes and so forth. And a majority of these women said, we in our careers had never experienced being held back in equality. We just did what we did, showed up and worked and contributed and so forth. And it was interesting that one of them even had feedback from a group of men in the team and said, "We're so glad that you are here. We would love to get your perspective, the female's perspective, because we feel that our perspective, just as all men on the team, is limited. So it's great." But isn't it interesting that these women never experienced what many other women, because it didn't even come into their bandwidth. They just showed up and did what they did, and used their gifts and talents.
right. And the difference is they had confidence.
Yeah.
They were confident and grounded and rooted in themselves, and they weren't wobbling with it.
Yeah.
They didn't feel like they had to have an opinion. They knew themselves and
Yeah.
they knew the value they brought forth.
Mhm.
And I think that's the real key that we learn in that awareness as we practice it. We start to notice our gifts,
Mhm.
our,
Yeah.
our character traits that make us unique, that
Yes.
help us to be that authentic version of us and owning what we bring to the
Mhm.
party, to helping humanity and the world and one another. And it doesn't mean you have to make a big footprint in the world.
Mhm.
If you're helping one person, that matters. The ripple of just helping one another goes out and expands.
It does. It does. It's so important. As we said earlier, just going right back to some of the points that we spoke about earlier, and I think that will segue beautifully into the last point that you wanted to talk more about, was around having awareness of what are some of the things that possibly if I spend a bit of time and investigating that and gotten some healing around that or dealt with that and looked at it in a different way, took the learnings from that and used those learnings to grow and evolve, then we would have much better outcomes. And as you say, it impacts all aspects of your life. But sometimes it can be a little bit scary, can't it, to
Yeah.
do those investigations? But I love the way that you've said, and this is into your third point, curiosity. Be curious. The
Yeah.
art of gentle, loving inquiry. So, how can we start to be curious about ourselves and be able to discover where are some gaps? Where are some things that I can look at to take the learnings away from so that I'm not triggered? In situations that perhaps would have me respond in a way that I would much rather be confident. What are some things that we can do?
That's beautiful. Thank you. That's a really important question that I think everyone starts asking because in the art of awareness to start with, we start to notice how we talk to ourselves, how we treat ourselves. And I go back to my first sales job. I made an error in an order for a client, and it cost the company about $1,500 to remake the job. And the company had a policy that they split it with the sales rep. And I said, no, give it all to me. I'll eat the whole thing. I want to make certain I never do this again.
Yeah.
And as I reflected back on just that, like, am I really that hard on myself? Do I really beat myself up like that? Generally, when we get curious, we're not nice to ourselves.
No.
We're defensive, we're blaming, we're accusatory, we're criticizing. And the first thing we have to do with awareness is to turn on the lens of love and compassion.
Yeah.
So we have to start getting curious and looking through the lens of love and compassionate, caring, concern, kindness, right? Like, how could I do this better? What could I do differently next time?
Yeah.
What do I need to make this right now? What will make me feel better? What will make others feel better? Right? And we have to serve all of those needs in ways that come from compassion, that come from love. That four-letter word, love, is powerful beyond all measure. You said earlier, in replying to seeing, words on a response right on social media, and you stop for a moment to pray, right? I think the best prayer I've ever learned is Ho'oponopono.
Mm.
And it's just 4 lines. And it's, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. And you're really talking to yourself. I'm sorry I'm so critical, so judgmental, please forgive me. Because as within, so without. So when people are projecting pain and hatred and hurt, that's what's going on inside. This is how we know the state of the world right now, the state of our community, the state of others. And as we grow in this awareness, we're able to help them.
Yeah.
We're able to be loving and kind to them and share that energy. And the light's always there. It might be dim, but it's always there. And a bright light makes another's light brighter.
Yeah, it's so important how you can respond. You just don't know. They may have had so many situations in their life, and then if someone did take the time to respond and in a way that didn't, again, push, wasn't sarcastic or anything like that, you really can almost be a response that has them go, wow, I appreciate that. I attacked that person, yet they responded in kindness. And I remember seeing, I can't remember what company it was, but a rep did a magnificent role. They were responded to by a parent or someone who was very angry that this salesperson or this company did something, and rather than reacting in anger or anything, that just curious, and started the conversation, and then opened it up, and then was able to then kind of transition the conversation to, well, how can we respond better? How can we help you? And then that conversation left with that parent saying, you know what, thank you so much for taking the time, for hearing me, for appreciating me. And I think then you can get to a stage or an opportunity where, whoops, you may not agree with all of the things, but you can respect each other. There's still respect there, and you can say, well, we can agree to disagree and still end, the conversation that way. I think that's so good to get to that place, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd love to add to that too, Anne-Marie. When we really master being curious with ourselves, another person's disagreement with us evokes curiosity.
Yeah.
What makes you think that? Right? You want to know more. Instead of dissing them, agreeing to disagree, right? Not hearing them, you value how they feel.
Yeah.
You place a level of importance and respect back out there, and you say, tell me more. I'm curious. I'm interested. I want to hear more.
Yeah, because each and every one of us has a different model of the world, isn't it? And that model of the world is shaped by circumstances, it's shaped by beliefs and values and so forth, all of those things. We're interesting people, aren't we, human beings?
We are.
Some of us more interesting than others.
My
It is. Be
fun.
curious. Life is too short to be quibbling. I always remember my mother saying that to me. Life is too short to hold grudges and things like that. So look, I have loved our conversation today. Donalee, how can people find out more about your work? How can they get in contact with you?
You can visit me at Donalee360.com. And from there, it takes you everywhere. It gives you my contact information. I don't know if you've heard about the 360 app, but it's a connector to everything. My website's there, a video's there. You can connect with me to schedule a Zoom call with me. My email's there, all different ways to get in touch with me.
Oh, fantastic.
Or at Donalee360.com.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know we have only scratched the surface, but all of the things that you spoke about today, I think is so important, always have been, but particularly so with everything that's going on around the world. And I think if we can go through just even some of the steps that you shared today, it will help us to navigate through that so that we can grow self-awareness, so that we can be curious. I love that word, curious. That's why I love being a podcast host, because I'm naturally curious. I love to know how things work. And if I don't know, I'll find out. I will find out. And gives me an opportunity to learn from wonderful people such as yourself, Donalee. So thanks once again for coming on the show.
Keep doing what you're doing.
This podcast is brought to you by theinfluencealliance.com. Want to influence real change with your message by becoming known as a trusted authority in your industry while building a sustainable and scalable business you love? Find out how by accessing our free podcast series at www.theinfluencealliance.com/podcast series. That's theinfluencealliance.com/podcast series.